No, I just don't think it's ever going to be possible. I don't think that, even if
Can you ever truly leave behind a life you were born into? Prince Harry's journey has been a battle between royal duty and personal freedom, shaped by privilege, loss, and relentless media scrutiny. From the heartbreaking death of his mother to the pressures of being the spare, his life has been anything but simple. Now, as he turns 40, has he finally found the peace he longed for, or is he still living under the weight of his past? Has stepping away from royalty given him the independence he sought, or has it only created new struggles? Let's explore this in more detail. From the moment he entered the world on 15th September 1984, Prince Harry was thrust into the spotlight. As the younger son of King Charles III and the beloved Princess Diana, he was always seen as the backup to the future king, Prince William. Unlike his elder brother, who bore the weight of preparing for the throne, Harry had a more unconventional role, one that allowed for more freedom but also left him struggling to define his purpose. His early years were filled with the kind of experiences only a royal could have, living in grand estates, attending official events, and being groomed for a life of duty. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The pressures of royal life were evident, even in childhood. Cameras followed his every move, journalists analyzed his every expression, and the expectations placed on him were clear. But all of this was nothing compared to the defining tragedy that would shape the rest of his life. In 1997, the world watched in shock as news broke of Princess Diana's death in a car accident in Paris. Harry was only 12 years old, too young to fully grasp the magnitude of the loss, but old enough to feel its devastating impact. The public mourned, flowers piled outside royal residences, and tributes poured in from every corner of the world. But for Harry and William, this wasn't just a national tragedy, it was a deeply personal one. The days following Diana's death were some of the hardest of his life. The now iconic image of Harry and William walking behind their mother's coffin remains etched in history. Forced to grieve in the most public way possible, the young prince had little time to process his emotions before being expected to return to royal duties. Years later, he would admit that he struggled to express his grief, pushing his emotions aside and carrying on as he was expected to. As he entered his teenage years, the impact of his mother's loss became more apparent. Attending Eton College, one of the most prestigious schools in the United Kingdom, Harry found himself surrounded by tradition and discipline. But the weight of royal expectations and the pain he had buried inside began to manifest in other ways. Unlike William, who adapted quickly to his role, Harry was often seen as the rebellious one. Reports of late-night parties, underage drinking, and occasional run-ins with the press painted him as the wild prince. While the public saw this as reckless behavior, those who knew him understood it was a cry for help. The trauma of losing his mother, combined with the intense scrutiny he faced, created a perfect storm of emotions he didn't know how to handle. Instead of addressing his pain, he chose to escape it, at least for a time. One of the few places where Harry found a sense of purpose was in the British Army. Enlisting in 2005, he embarked on a career that allowed him to step away from the royal limelight and focus on something greater than himself. Serving in the military gave him structure, discipline, and, most importantly, a sense of identity beyond being a prince. His deployments to Afghanistan were particularly significant. For the first time, he was treated not as a royal, but as a soldier, just another member of the team. His time in the army wasn't without controversy. In 2007, his deployment had to be cut short after a media leak put his safety, and that of his fellow soldiers, at risk. It was a painful moment for Harry, who had wanted to prove himself outside of his royal title. Despite the setback, he continued his military career, eventually rising to the rank of captain. He later founded the Invictus Games, an international sporting event for wounded veterans, showcasing his commitment to those who served. But as much as the military provided him with a purpose, it wasn't enough to shield him from the struggles he had yet to confront. By his late 20s, the weight of his unresolved grief began to take a toll on his mental health. He later admitted that for years, he had buried his emotions, refusing to acknowledge the pain of losing his mother. This suppression led to intense anxiety, moments of uncontrollable anger, and feelings of isolation. It wasn't until he was encouraged to seek therapy that things began to change. Speaking openly about his struggles, he became one of the first high-profile royals to advocate for mental health awareness. His honesty about seeking professional help broke long-standing stigmas within the royal family, where personal struggles were traditionally kept behind closed doors. Even as he worked through his personal challenges, his role within the royal family remained a question mark. While William was preparing to take on greater responsibilities, Harry was still trying to carve out his place. The title of Spare had followed him since birth, and with every passing year, it became clearer that he would never play a central role in the monarchy. By the time he reached his mid-30s, another defining chapter of his life was about to begin. In 2016, he met Meghan Markle, an American actress best known for her role in the television series Suits. Their relationship moved quickly, and by 2018 they were married in a grand royal wedding watched by millions around the world. For a brief moment, it seemed like Harry had found his happily ever after. But behind the scenes, tensions were brewing. Meghan's introduction into the royal family wasn't smooth. She faced intense media scrutiny, with tabloids dissecting every aspect of her past, her family, and her character. The negative press coverage quickly turned into something more toxic, with racial undertones appearing in some of the headlines. Harry, who had spent his entire life under media scrutiny, recognized the dangers of this type of attention. The press had played a role in his mother's suffering, and now he saw history repeating itself with his wife. As the criticism grew, so did the strain on their relationship with the royal family. Rumors of disagreements with other senior royals, particularly Prince William and Kate Middleton, began to circulate. In early 2020, Harry and Meghan made the shocking decision to step back from their roles as senior royals. Their announcement sent shockwaves through the monarchy and divided public opinion. Some viewed their departure as a necessary step for their well-being, while others saw it as a betrayal of royal duty. Regardless of perspective, it was clear that Harry was once again at a crossroads, forced to choose between loyalty to his family and his desire to protect his own. The transition was far from easy. Moving to North America, first to Canada and then to California, Harry and Meghan began a new chapter of their lives. Financial independence became a priority, leading them to sign multi-million-dollar deals with streaming platforms like Netflix and Spotify. Their interviews and documentaries gave the public a closer look into their side of the story, shedding light on their struggles within the royal institution. But leaving royal life didn't mean leaving behind the challenges. In many ways, the scrutiny followed them across the Atlantic. The press remained relentless, questioning their every move. Their security concerns became a major issue, with Harry fighting legal battles over protection for his family. The sense of belonging that the army had once given him was gone, and the stability of the royal family was now out of reach. As he approaches 40, Harry finds himself in a complex position. No longer a working royal, but still a public figure. No longer living in the United Kingdom, but still deeply connected to its history. No longer just a prince, but a husband, a father, and a man trying to define his own legacy. The journey hasn't been easy, and the challenges haven't disappeared. What comes next for him remains uncertain. Stepping away from royal life was one of the most significant decisions Harry had ever made. For years, he had struggled to balance his duties with his personal well-being, but by early 2020, the burden had become unbearable. The announcement that he and Meghan would step back from their senior royal roles sent shockwaves through the monarchy. The couple stated that they wanted to carve out a progressive new role while continuing to serve the Queen in a limited capacity. However, it quickly became clear that a half-in, half-out arrangement was not an option. Following discussions with the royal family, it was decided that Harry and Meghan would fully step away from their royal responsibilities. This meant losing their HRH, his and her Royal Highness titles, stepping back from royal patronages, and most significantly for Harry, relinquishing his honorary military roles. Having spent years building his career in the armed forces, this was an especially painful consequence of his departure. He had always felt a deep connection to the military, and being stripped of his official roles was a stark reminder of what he had given up. With their departure finalized, Harry and Meghan initially moved to Canada before relocating to the United States. Settling in California, they sought to establish a new life for themselves and their children. Montecito, an affluent area in Santa Barbara, became their home. a far cry from the palaces and castles of Britain, but a place where they hoped to find privacy and peace. For Harry, however, adapting to this new reality was not as simple as changing locations. The transition from being a working royal to a private citizen came with its own set of challenges. The public and media scrutiny did not disappear. If anything, the couple's departure from the royal family only intensified global interest in their lives. The British press continued to cover their every move, dissecting their financial decisions, their public statements, and their ongoing tensions with the monarchy. In America, while they had a different level of freedom, they were not entirely shielded from criticism. Financial independence became a crucial part of their new chapter. Without royal funding, Harry and Meghan needed to establish their own sources of income. The couple secured high-profile deals with Netflix and Spotify, projects that were meant to allow them to share stories that aligned with their values. Their documentary series and podcast ventures aimed to give them a platform beyond traditional royal duties. However, not all of these projects were met with universal praise. Some critics viewed them as an attempt to profit from their royal connections, while others questioned the direction of their new careers. Despite the financial security these deals provided, they did not solve the emotional toll of leaving behind his past life. Harry's relationship with his family remained strained. Reports suggested that conversations with Prince William were limited, and his interactions with King Charles were equally distant. Even with attempts to mend fences, the damage done by their public interviews, particularly the one with Oprah Winfrey in 2021, deepened the divide. In that interview, Harry and Meghan openly discussed the difficulties they faced within the royal institution, revealing details that shocked audiences worldwide. While some sympathized with their experiences, others saw it as an unnecessary airing of family grievances. Away from royal life, Harry also faced significant security concerns. As a member of the royal family, he had been afforded a level of protection that was now no longer guaranteed. He expressed concerns about the safety of his family, particularly when visiting the United Kingdom. Legal battles ensued over his right to receive police protection while in Britain, a fight that highlighted the complexities of his new status. While he was no longer a working royal, he remained a high-profile individual with legitimate security risks. Beyond his struggles with family and security, Harry also grappled with his evolving public image. In Britain, he had once been one of the most beloved members of the royal family. His down-to-earth nature and dedication to causes like veterans' welfare and mental health made him widely admired. But as time passed, public opinion became more divided. Some still supported his decision to step away, seeing it as an act of personal courage. Others viewed it as a rejection of duty, a move that distanced him from the traditions he had once embraced. The passage of time did little to ease the tensions between Harry and his royal relatives. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, it was a moment of national mourning but also a deeply personal loss for Harry. Despite the differences that had arisen in recent years, he had always maintained a close relationship with his grandmother. Attending the funeral alongside the rest of the royal family was a solemn and emotional experience. However, even in grief, the divisions remained visible. His interactions with Prince William were reportedly minimal, and his role in the mourning period was noticeably different from that of his brother. Following the Queen's passing, Charles ascended to the throne as King Charles III. This transition further changed the royal dynamic. As the new head of the monarchy, Charles was tasked with maintaining stability in an institution that had undergone significant upheaval. For Harry, his father's reign marked yet another chapter in his evolving relationship with the royal family. Though there were occasional signs of reconciliation, the underlying tensions had not disappeared. Meanwhile, life in California continued. Harry and Meghan focused on their philanthropic efforts, working on initiatives related to mental health, climate change, and social justice. They launched Archewell, a foundation aimed at making positive societal impacts. Through various projects, they continued to champion the causes they cared about. But even their charitable work was not without controversy. Critics questioned their level of involvement and whether their activism was more about public image than genuine impact. As Harry approached his 40th birthday, the weight of his choices became more evident. No longer a prince in the traditional sense, but still bound by his royal heritage, he found himself in an unusual position. He had built a life outside the monarchy, yet he remained connected to it in ways he could not escape. The scrutiny, the divided opinions, the complicated family ties, all of these factors shaped his reality as he reached this milestone age. Though he had spoken openly about his desire for a more peaceful existence, the challenges of his past continued to follow him. Whether through media coverage, legal battles, or ongoing family dynamics, Harry's story remained one of both triumph and hardship. The life he envisioned when stepping away from the royal family had materialized in some ways, but proved far more complex in others. With his 40th year marking a significant personal milestone, questions remained about what lay ahead. Would he find a way to fully reconcile with his family? Would he redefine his public image beyond the royal narrative? Or would the path he had chosen continue to present unforeseen obstacles? These uncertainties made it clear that despite everything he had accomplished and endured, his journey was still unfolding. Despite all the changes Harry had embraced over the years, one thing remained constant: his struggle to fully escape the shadow of his royal past. Living in California offered a different kind of freedom, but it did not erase the complexities that came with being born into one of the most famous families in the world. Every step he took, every decision he made was still analyzed through the lens of his royal status. For some, he was an admirable figure who had chosen personal happiness over duty. For others, he was a lost prince detached from the traditions that once defined him. As he entered his 40s, the realities of his new life became increasingly clear. While he and Meghan had built a comfortable existence, the challenges they faced continued to mount. The press remained relentless, often portraying them as either victims or villains, depending on the narrative of the day. Public perception fluctuated. One moment they were celebrated for speaking their truth, and the next they were criticized for overexposure. It seemed that no matter how far he moved from the monarchy, he would always be connected to it in ways he could not control. The couple's media projects, particularly their Netflix documentary and Harry's memoir, brought their story to an even wider audience. These projects were meant to give them the chance to tell their side of the story, unfiltered by the royal institution or the British press. However, they also fueled more controversy. While some praised their openness, others saw the projects as an unnecessary attack on the royal family. Critics accused them of profiting from their royal connections while simultaneously denouncing them. The memoir, in particular, was met with a divided response. Harry's detailed recollections of his upbringing, his struggles with mental health, and his fallout with his family were deeply personal. But some members of the public and the media questioned whether such revelations were necessary. One of the most contentious aspects of his book was his portrayal of his relationship with Prince William. While the brothers had once shared an unbreakable bond, time and circumstances had widened the gap between them. Harry spoke openly about their differences, about moments of tension and resentment that had built up over the years. He described feeling like the spare in contrast to William, the heir. The world had always known that the dynamic between the two brothers was different from that of ordinary siblings, but hearing it directly from Harry made it even more apparent. The book laid bare the emotional struggles that had shaped his life, but it also made reconciliation with his family even more difficult. The response from the royal family to his memoir was, as expected, one of silence. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace refrained from public comments, continuing their tradition of handling internal matters privately. But it was clear that behind the scenes, the revelations had caused tension. Reports suggested that Charles and William felt hurt by the book, viewing it as an unnecessary airing of grievances. While there was no official backlash, it was evident that the distance between Harry and his family had grown even wider. Beyond the book and the ongoing public scrutiny, Harry faced personal struggles that extended beyond his relationship with his family. Adapting to life in America had its own set of challenges. Though he and Meghan had built a network of friends and allies, the cultural shift was undeniable. He had spent his entire life in the United Kingdom, surrounded by traditions that were deeply ingrained in him. Moving to a different country with different social norms and expectations required a significant adjustment. He was no longer a prince in the traditional sense, but he was still expected to navigate a world where his name carried immense weight. His work continued to focus on causes he was passionate about. The Invictus Games remained one of his most meaningful projects, providing a platform for wounded veterans to showcase their resilience and strength. He also remained involved in mental health advocacy, speaking openly about his experiences and encouraging others to seek help when needed. But despite these accomplishments, he was still searching for a clear direction. Without the structure of royal life, defining his purpose became a challenge. Financially, he and Meghan had secured stability through their media deals and speaking engagements, but the long-term sustainability of their ventures was still uncertain. The end of their Spotify deal raised questions about the viability of their media projects. While their Netflix contract remained in place, the entertainment industry was unpredictable, and maintaining relevance in such a competitive space required constant effort. They had positioned themselves as storytellers, but the challenge was ensuring that their narratives remained compelling to audiences over time. His legal battles also continued to add stress to his life. The fight over security provisions when visiting the United Kingdom remained unresolved. As a high-profile figure, the question of personal safety was not just about privilege, it was a legitimate concern. The legal proceedings regarding his right to police protection in Britain highlighted the unique position he found himself in. He was not a working royal, yet he was not an ordinary citizen either. His status, somewhere in between, created complications that had no clear resolution. The emotional toll of everything he had been through was undeniable. Though he had spent years working on his mental health, the pressures he faced had not disappeared. The scrutiny, the family tensions, the constant speculation about his life, all of it weighed heavily on him. Even with therapy and the support of Meghan, there were moments when it seemed like he was still carrying the burdens of his past. With each passing year, the question of his future loomed larger. Would he continue on the path he had chosen, building a life that was entirely separate from the monarchy? Or would there come a time when reconciliation with his family was possible? The answers were unclear, but one thing was certain: his story was still unfolding. No matter how far he moved from his royal past, the impact of that past would always shape his future. Turning 40 was not just another birthday for Harry. It was a moment of reflection, a milestone that forced him to look back on everything he had gained and lost. The years had been filled with choices that changed the course of his life, some empowering, others deeply painful. His decision to leave the royal family had granted him a level of independence that few royals had ever experienced, but it had also placed him in a strange and complicated position. No longer a prince in the traditional sense, but still a figure of global interest. No longer living under the control of the monarchy, but still defined by it. Despite the freedom he had sought, his life remained under constant scrutiny. The media coverage surrounding him and Meghan had not disappeared. If anything, it had evolved. In the United Kingdom, much of the press had turned against him, painting him as a man who had abandoned his duty. In the United States, he was embraced by some, but viewed with skepticism by others. While he had hoped for a quieter existence, he was still navigating a world that had strong opinions about him, both good and bad. The struggle for privacy was ongoing. Montecito provided a peaceful retreat, a stark contrast to the formality of royal palaces, but complete isolation was never possible. Paparazzi still followed them. Media outlets still speculated about their every move. Even in a country where they had more control over their narrative, they could not escape the reality that their lives would always be of interest to the public. This was the paradox of their existence, seeking a life away from the monarchy while still being defined by their departure from it. The pressure also extended to their professional lives. While their media deals had secured financial independence, there were signs of instability. Their Spotify deal had ended earlier than expected, raising questions about the long-term future of their production company. While Netflix remained a significant partner, there was uncertainty about how sustainable their career in entertainment would be. The challenge of remaining relevant outside of the royal sphere was becoming more apparent. Harry had always spoken about his desire to make a meaningful impact. His work with the Invictus Games continued, providing a sense of purpose that remained untouched by controversy. His advocacy for mental health awareness was ongoing, with speaking engagements and collaborations that reinforced his commitment to the cause. But despite these efforts, there was a growing sense that he was still searching for something, some clarity about what his life would look like outside the royal framework. His personal relationships were another complicated matter. The distance between him and the royal family had not closed. While there had been moments where communication seemed to improve, the deep wounds remained. His relationship with Prince William, once a source of strength, was now a reminder of how much had changed. They had shared so much: childhood memories, the trauma of losing their mother, the pressures of royal life. But the choices they had made as adults had taken them down completely different paths. William had embraced his role, preparing to be king. Harry had walked away, choosing a future on his own terms. The contrast between them had never been greater. With King Charles now on the throne, the family dynamic had shifted again. While Harry had once spoken warmly about his father, their relationship had become increasingly strained. The weight of royal duty, combined with the public nature of their disagreements, had made reconciliation difficult. Some moments had given hope: brief conversations, shared experiences during times of national mourning, but the barriers between them remained. Amidst all of this, fatherhood was perhaps the most grounding part of Harry's life. Raising his children in California, away from the royal traditions that had shaped his own childhood, gave him a new perspective. He wanted them to have the freedom he had never known, to grow up without the weight of expectation. This was one area where he felt truly in control, where he could make choices without the influence of the institution he had left behind. But even here, challenges remained. He had spoken about the importance of protecting his family, of ensuring that they were not subjected to the same pressures that had defined his youth. The reality, however, was more complicated. His children were still part of the royal lineage. No matter how much he tried to create a normal life for them, they would always be connected to the monarchy in ways he could not entirely control. As he entered this new decade of his life, the questions about his future only grew louder. Would he ever return to the royal family in some capacity? Would time heal the divisions between him and his relatives? Would he continue to build a career outside the monarchy? Or would the challenges of remaining relevant push him toward a different path? These were questions that had no clear answers. What was certain, however, was that his story was still being written. The journey had been long and filled with obstacles. From the loss of his mother to the struggles of royal life, from his time in the military to his eventual departure from the institution, from the excitement of building a new life in America to the challenges of staying true to his values, each chapter had shaped him in ways he never could have anticipated. At 40, he was no longer the carefree prince the world had once known. He was a man who had made difficult choices, faced intense criticism, and continued to navigate a life that remained anything but simple. No matter what the future held, one thing was undeniable: Harry's story was one of transformation. He had fought for the life he wanted, but in doing so, had discovered that true freedom came with its own set of challenges. Whether he would find the peace he was looking for remained to be seen. But as he moved forward, one thing was certain: his past, his choices, and his identity would always be part of who he was. The prince, who had once seemed destined for a very different future, had taken control of his own path. Where it would lead him next was a question only time could answer. While California had become home, there were moments when it was clear that Harry still struggled with his place in the world. He had built a life separate from the monarchy, yet no matter how much he distanced himself, he was still viewed through the lens of his royal past. Every statement he made, every appearance he attended, every project he pursued was analyzed in the context of what he had left behind. It was a paradox. He had chosen a new path, yet the old one still shaped public perception of him. The struggle was not just external. Internally, he continued to wrestle with questions about his identity and purpose. His professional ventures had brought both success and controversy. His memoir had been a global bestseller, drawing attention to his personal experiences and the challenges he had faced within the royal institution. But it had also deepened the divide between him and his family. Some saw his openness as necessary, a way to shed light on the struggles of being born into such a unique life. Others viewed it as an attack on the very institution that had given him so much. His ties to the United Kingdom were another unresolved issue. Though he had built a home in America, there was still a connection to Britain that could not be erased. Returning for key events, such as the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, had brought him face to face with the family he had left behind. These visits were often brief and formal, lacking the warmth that once defined his relationships with his father and brother. Each time he returned, speculation arose about whether reconciliation was possible. But as time passed, the divisions remained, and it became increasingly unclear if the bonds could ever fully be repaired. As he reflected on his 40th year, the question of legacy weighed on him. He had made history by stepping away from the institution that had shaped his entire life. He had redefined what it meant to be a prince, challenging the expectations that came with his title. But had he found peace? Had he achieved what he set out to do? These were questions that did not have easy answers. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.